Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. Today is Poetry Mondays. Today we're going to go into, I have a kind of little bit long poem today. It's called Song of the Soul. That's the featured poem today. It's by Suman, Pokhrel. I'm hoping I'm saying his name correctly. It's a really deep poem. I ran across it actually accidentally. I was looking up another artist, and I have actually been inhaling this artist's poetry all week because I'm just in love with it. So I'm sharing with you, and then we're going to invite you to look at this concept of the the integration here of the soul, because it's what is being proposed to us here with the poem. So today, we have, for those of you who are new, we have 3 parts to our meetup. The first part, well, I'll read you the featured poem, and then I'll invite all of you to read your favorite poem or a poem of your own. It doesn't have to be the same theme with the featured poem. It's fine if it's not. After everyone who wants to has read their poem, we will go into the second portion, which is a collaborative poem that we will create together using the centralized focus theme that we provide you. And then we'll come back after that together again, and we will read the collaborative poem and then discuss, what the process brought up for you, what things did we find or, learn about ourselves in the writing of these poems. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, so without further ado, here is the featured poem for you. It's called Song of Soul by Suman Pokhrel. May I splinter away? Apologies, somebody's waving.
Sorry, can I ask a favor? Do you have it on print, and can you screen share it so we can read along at the same time?
Yes, okay? I can, and I shall.
I appreciate that a lot. Thanks.
It is a long one, so that's a good idea. Okay, so I'm hoping you guys are seeing the screen now. And just so you know, this is also posted on the meetup page for the discussion. So, Song of the Soul. May I splinter away from myself, break into whole units, and live in each with perfection. This me, made whole by combining countless fragments, could not live in any one part with complete ease. May I show a true model of deconstruction to Derrida by taking off parts that make up my being, so that I would see one man fallen off me, shambling down the street, and continue to speak in assemblies with full ignorance of the subject, continue to review the news of the world by stuffing them in his brain, and go yapping in the crowds, fully content in the perfection of his inferior sphere. The other one brooding over the ledger books and the personal files of the employees. May the next one always keep reading, the other one looking after children, and still another swimming in love all his life. May the other fragment, the me whom I don't like, remain shut somewhere in the room. May one other splinter engage in inner decoration of the house and meet the hunger of needs. If he cannot do so, may he fragment himself further into contractors supplying vegetables, miscellanies, clothes, and fuels, and sorting out other mess. May one other part, forgetting that he is my splinter, continue to clap on each stupid action of his boss, shaking head, and remain busy in his little puppet moves. May the other take responsibility of television, radio, and papers. May the other still stay repeating the news of the relatives and acquaintances, fulfilling formalities of well-being, embroiling in the fatigue, where, what, how, participating in all of 16 rituals and birthdays. May the other one continue to repeat the non-news of his immobility and continue to go places where people gather and go doing something like that May I hold an assembly of the proportional representation of all my selves. May I go out with the poet by leaving all the others in their chaotic, meaningless arguments. May my poet remain a poet in its perfection, unattached to my domesticity, full of scarcities. May he remain separate from a job-savvy me who has sold his self-respect. May my poet disengage itself from my being swayed by my brain. May I discard the outer cover of time from the layers of poetry by immersing the poet in its entirety within me and dismantle geography's barriers. May I break the windows of consciousness, break further the dilapidations of wakened moments and emerge into the bright world of dream. May life remain enamored of its own charm. May the river of love always flow from its own lap. May my pain remain drunk, singing its own love songs, and the dead body of agony remain asleep, resting its head on a pillow of flowers. May I free myself from the labyrinth of knowledge, run away from the jungle of thoughts, and jump from the hill of illusion into the mind's speedy currents by stepping on this joint of time. May I pack all inventions in burlaps and hide them in corners of Einstein's brains. May I free myself from the ever-pressing chest and enter the garden of imagination by leisurely hiding brain on hill summits. May I take off clothes covering shame at the border, leaving them hanging on dry trees of arrogance and run by wearing the rays of the sun. May I create plain fields by collecting clouds and bedeck them with arching rainbows. Plain ball of wind reaching the other end of the road not taken. May I call in Robert Frost by holding hands and request Ginsberg to recite How Facing the World. May I bet with Devkota, sitting contentedly by receiving his Lord's blessings, that you are a poet who has written epics and win a bag full of stars. May I exchange T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland with the future of this earth like a lunatic's dreams, and make one season of poetry farming by tilling with the pen of desire. Oh, this me, made of so many fragments, could not make any achievements. May I then splinter away from myself and live only with the poet. So this poem is funny, it's delightful, it's engaging, it's heartbreaking, it's soul touching, especially if you are one who has the perception of a dichotomy between one's life and one's poetic energies. So that's why this poem spoke to me. And I think it's a very deep poem, and it will be great to watch us. So we're going to do a theme that is in line with this poem today, so that we can take whatever this poem moved within us and channel it into our collaborative poem and then discuss that, because I think there's a lot here and hopefully you agree with me. And so that's the featured poem for today. Just one more time for you, if you're wondering at the poet's name, it is Suman Pokhrel. Okay, so now if you would like to read a poem, share your own poem, please do type in an exclamation mark in the chat, And I will call on you in order I see your exclamation, and we will welcome you to please speak. All right, first up, I'm seeing Joe. Go ahead, Joe.
I'm going to choose this one by David Whyte, Sweet Darkness. When your eyes are tired, the world is tired also. When your vision has gone, no part of the world can find you. Time to go into the dark, where the night has eyes to recognize its own. There you can be sure you are not beyond love. The dark will be your home tonight. The night will give you a horizon further than you can see. You must learn one thing. The world was made to be free in. Give up all of the worlds except the one which you belong. Sometimes it takes darkness and the sweet confinement of your loneliness to learn. Anything or anyone that does not bring you alive is too small for you. Yeah, so this poem is essentially about letting go of things that are most precious to you, and how to engage with essentially the unknown. And so this idea that there are new horizons. And so again, it's kind of like moving on and just embracing things as opposed to resisting them. So I kind of thought of a little bit of Amar Fati in it.
Awesome, thank you. It also, it blends quite nicely with the featured poem. It's awesome, thank you. Next up, I have Allison.
Okay. This one is called Summer by Louise Gluck. Okay. Remember the days of our first happiness, how strong we were, how dazed by passion, lying all day, then all night in the narrow bed, sleeping there, eating there too. It was summer. It seemed everything had ripened at once. And so hot we lay completely uncovered. Sometimes the wind rose, a willow brushed the window, but we were lost in a way. Didn't you feel that? The bed was like a raft. I felt us drifting far from our natures, toward a place where we discovered nothing. First the sun, then the moon and fragments, stone through the willow, things anyone could see. Then the circles closed. Slowly the nights grew cool. The pendant leaves of the willow yellowed and fell, and in each of us began a deep isolation. Though we never spoke of this, of the absence of regret, we were artists again, my husband. We could resume the journey. I really like it because it just reminds me a lot of how summer feels. And, you know, the sort of, some of these images, I feel like summer is just kind of like this time, it's like this pause when you can just, you know, really just fully live and not have to rush around doing a million things. And I like the image of, you know, that everything had ripened at once, and also the image of the raft. And yesterday I went inner tubing down a river. So for like 3 hours, I just lay on this raft staring at the trees and listening to the birds. And it was just like the most, it was like a moving meditation. I mean, it was just phenomenal. And I don't know, it just, you know, it's midsummer. It just kind of seemed like the right time to read that poem.
Awesome, thank you. Would anyone else like to read a poem or their poem? All right, Lily, go ahead.
This is Survivor's Glee by Jeffrey McDaniel. I strapped on an oxygen tank and dove into the past, paddling back through the years, emerging from a manhole, a memory lane. The boondocks were doing just fine without me. The car dealerships, the trash heaps, the stream of consciousness where I learned how to skinny dip had slowed down into a trickle of amnesia. All the houses had been gutted, except mine, where my family was still eating dinner. My parents welcomed me with opened elbows. My brother looked up to me like a cave drawing on the ceiling. The night hobbled by, rattling its beggar's cup. A pipe burst behind my eyes, which brought out the plumber and everyone. At a loss for words, I placed the seashell on my tongue, and my relatives wore bathing suits when they spoke to me. I liked this poem because, for one, I feel like it's very real, it's very truthful, and that's something I really value in poetry. It's, if anything, it has to come from deep within yourself, and all the superficial layers has to, like, you have to get rid of it somehow. And the other one is the very clever use of metaphor, and it's not metaphor for metaphor's sake. I feel like it's metaphor for a very meaningful purpose, and something that's difficult to explain, but this is why I like this poem.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Next up, Jeff.
Hi, Maritza.
Jeff, you muted yourself. Hi.
Sorry.
No worries.
I'm doing all this on my phone. So I'm going to go to where I have this poem without muting myself. It sort of sounds like the name of a poem itself, waiting to be written. So this is a poem by Ralph Waldo Emerson. And my wife and I had the chance to have a wonderful leisurely lunch today in a restaurant that we've never been in. She's a psychotherapist, and I'm, a leadership coach and trainer. And sometimes we get a chance to really just compare notes about things that we're discovering and learning. And today's conversation was a 3-hour conversation about presence, which was really wonderful. And this poem by Emerson reminded me of discovering and practicing presence. He said, "Write it on your heart that every day is the best day of the year. He is rich who owns the day, and no one owns the day who allows it to be invaded with fret and anxiety. Finish every day and be done with it. You've done what you could. Some blunders and absurdities, no doubt, crept in. Forget them as soon as you can. Tomorrow is a new day. Begin it well and serenely, with too high a spirit to be cumbered with your old nonsense. The day is too dear with its hopes and invitations to waste a moment on the yesterdays." And while his metaphor here is the beginning of a new day, really it could just as easily be applied to each new moment, and the capacity and the ability to practice being present in each moment without necessarily getting stuck or caught or distracted by reactions or one's judgments or whatever our opinions were of the past, even sometimes of the past several minutes. And that agility is a great supporter of one's ability to really offer the presence that we desire to be able to contribute to relationships and situations and ourselves. And so I love this metaphor, and I love the new day is too dear with its hopes and invitations to waste a moment on the yesterdays.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for sharing. Next up, I have Brian.
Hi, Maritza. Well, I've spent the last half hour deciding whether to go with my favorite poem that I told you about.
Is
Maybe
this
on
the
your,
poem you've been promising us that you may read someday?
yeah.
Is today the day?
I thought about it. I thought, well, maybe if I just read 1, 2, maybe 3 sections, it wouldn't be too bad. And then I said, nope, can't do that. So
Gotcha.
I've chosen a very short poem, which is very beautiful. And it's by a young lady called Emily Bronte. Its title is The Old Stoic. Riches I hold in right esteem, and love I laugh to scorn, and lust of fame was but a dream that vanished with the morn. And if I pray, the only prayer that moves my lips for me is leave the heart that now I bear and give me liberty. Yes, as my swift days near their goal, 'tis all that I implore, in life and death, a chainless soul with courage to endure. That's it. I like Bronte's writing, but her poetry I've never really looked into too much. And while flicking through the pages of this book, trying to avoid the other poem, I found this little one and decided that it was so beautiful I had to read it.
Awesome. That's lovely. Thank you. Thank you for sharing it. I have, anyone else like to read a poem, their favorite poem, one that spoke to them or their own? Okay, so what? I don't see anyone else here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you a poem of mine. This is a poem that I wrote fairly recently. And it seems like I'm speaking of a person, but I'm actually speaking of myself. I did not give this one a title, so it doesn't have a title. Where did you come from? How can this be? Somehow something in me recognizes a light in you. I was looking for a little pleasant company. I'd hoped for a good conversation, maybe friendship forming. I got beauty, unfiltered, unexpected, pure. Not convinced in the reality of this thing. Confusion reigns in a mind accustomed to order and reason. Logic dictates I should walk away, preserve you as memory. An enchanting, baffling, electrifying, an accidental interlude. But my very nerve endings are stretching towards you. What I'm feeling I couldn't possibly name. Yet the desire to reach out and grab it is so fierce. Desire, hunger, longing, hope, a turmoil of emotions screaming through me. Somehow, something in me recognizes a light in you. So I had a day where, I don't know if you guys have had it where, you find you're kind of in a funk and you didn't realize you're in a funk until you snap out of it. And this is my realization that I'm snapping out of it. So that's my poem. I would invite you guys one last moment, if you would like, throw up an exclamation mark. Oh, I see Paul. Go ahead, Paul.
I was debating, but I'll read something that came from a prompt. And I'm in a writing group and they give prompts. And I feel like I should tell you the prompt because I never write poems like this. So just if you're a writer and you want to stimulate your brain in a weird way, force yourself to write to some prompt that has nothing to do with your life whatsoever. And the prompt was simply the grounding thing that Jeff, hi, good to see you, Jeff, by the way, long time. But that counselors use to ground a person who's kind of dissociating. 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear. It's all the 5 senses, 3 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can taste, 1 thing you can smell. So that was just the prompt. Like, okay, what are you going to write based on that? So a strange thing came out of it that is part of my real life, and it's combining a set of elements, and I'm really not sure how great it is, but it says something, so I'm going to read it. I don't want to count the number of years since we broke down together, but I do. I found a get well card among the flyers and false promises with only your initials as the return address. I will never write back except in this journal where I can let the words flow as they will. When I first woke up, I heard them say, "His eyes are fluttering." These strangers caring for a stranger in the deep, deep hospital night. The way they reached out to me, I reached for you like that in the middle of our last night when I was trying to save our life. There's care in their distant voices, the nurses and specialists coming in like some lost radio wave. You're in a hospital. You're going to be okay. Tell us 5 things you can see. Probing eyes above mask bathed in fluorescence, my fragile body in pajama blue. 4 things you can hear, the monitor, the heartbeat, the clatter of some metal tray, shuffling footsteps, the hissing air. Yes, I can taste, touch, smell, but my senses drift inwards. I do not answer. I am sensing another room, another time. I feel the sensation of you washing back over me. My mind starts singing a country song, 5 things we touched, 4 ways we used to dream, 3 ways I can rewind and fast forward to what we could have been. I reorient. My floating angels in blue pajamas of their own urge me to return to the beeping, humming room. Perhaps I needed the reminder. Yes, I can. This is not the first time I learned how to die. After all, I've been shot through the heart before and survived. That's it.
That's great. For especially because it's a prompt poem. Prompt poems they're not that easy to do. Very
I
impressive.
never write these like personal romantic, I don't know, it all just came out, a new thing. Maybe
Nice.
I needed to, right?
Nice to stretch, nice to stretch. All right, folks, so now we're going to move on to our second portion of our evening. And so we're going to do a collaborative poem. I'm going to ask you to reconsider the poem that was read as the featured poem today. And the aspect there, these are the fragments of self, integration and disintegration of self. So let's think of those concepts, and that'll be our focus and theme as we go into the collaborative poem. We're going to break you out into 2 groups today. Allison will be your moderator for one, I will be your moderator for the other, and then we'll all come back together and read our poems together and discuss what they brought out on us or what any poem read today brought up in you. So have fun. We're gonna do, we do the 20 minutes. Allison, you wanna do 10 minutes for write-up, or what do you think? 20 minutes, right? Put in lines, 10 minutes restructuring,
Yeah,
5,
that's
10?
Sure.
All right, that's what we'll do. So we'll see you guys back here in about 25, 30 minutes. Allison, did you wanna read yours first? You're muted.
You're muted.
We volunteered Joe, actually.
Oh, nice. Lucky Joe. Joe, read on. And then when you're done, throw
I
it up in
kinda-
chat.
No, I don't have it. That's kind of an issue.
Oh,
You got to throw it up there. To a screen share.
he's going to read it, but he doesn't have it. That could be a slight problem.
Oh, there we go. Dramatis persona, a cast of thousands in a shell of one, rolls upon a stage signifying something. What that something is still remains unknown and unknowable. The curtain parts and reveals a forest with 2 paths, lights, camera, action, dramatic choices. I stepped on stage, trembling. I stepped onto the road less traveled. I hear the louder whisper, no, from the wings. Not that one. Do what everyone else is doing. Startled, I followed my orders and took the road more traveled. What so many footsteps? How could anyone notice mine? I climbed many a stage to find whether I am in the main cast, and I am still searching. The persona's purpose, playing for laughs, paycheck, or self-fulfillment. Will I be remembered? Will anyone care? My footsteps walked here. Does anyone notice? Life has shown me fear in a handful of dust. The curtain is closing. I realize that is too dust, that my persona your will return. Sorry, your message came up right over the words, Maritza.
Apologies.
Well read.
That was great. I do need somebody to throw it into the chat for me so I can grab it. Because, you know, I do throw them up on our hyperbook. For those of you who are new, we do have a hyperbook where every poem that we've read, you know, except for some personal poems, we post the links to them for you guys from week to week. So this is week 20. If you can believe it, you guys have been hanging out with me for 5 months. So this is week 20. And I do, if anyone reads a personal poem, I would never post it just to post. I'll reach out to you and ask for permission. But the collaborative poems do get thrown up on the hyperbook. So let us go on to our poems. So this, we also have our poems not entirely titled, but you know, the never-ending conversation with ourselves, right? So, okay. The never-ending conversation with, well, I could throw it up on the screen too. Why not? The never-ending conversation with myself. I am diving in. Out of many, one. Is it divine or just benign? So many roles, so many masks. A lesson learned. Listen, don't play with your pen. Always alone, always together. As much as I tried to escape my ego, it never failed to catch up to me. Where I tried to integrate, I failed. Rather than fighting my selves, I keep them contained in separate spheres where they exist happily, incommensurable from each other. Nowadays, I wonder, is integration really the answer? The mixed metaphor is lurking in the shadows. I hear them knocking, then move on. I see the stars, then they are gone. Retreat proved impossible. The shadows followed, always together, always alone. I learned to embrace incoherence. I only understand truth through my peripheral vision. That requires more thinking, the never-ending conversation with myself. I discover more of who I am, the more I am with you. Sitting here, feeling content, I worry it's merely tunnel vision. Liberation is defining the parts of yourself you'd rather get rid of, paralyzed in fear of dismissing the ones I need. Sometimes there's freedom to be found in letting go. When our eyes meet, I travel through you to myself. Of all the poems I've ever written, this is one of them. Just kidding. It's so self-aware. The never-ending conversation with myself. So that was our poem, and I rather like it.
There's some good comedy in that one. I'm reminded of the poem that's roses are red, violets are blue. Some poems rhyme, but this one doesn't. It's a kind of got that
Indeed.
internal mockery thing going on there.
Just a bit. So yeah, so now guys, I invite you all to comment for me on your thoughts of the process of making the poem, the subject, you know, what things came up that may have surprised you about the topic, and what did any of the poems invoke within you? these are the things that we'd like to discuss here. So I invite you to share with us that. And I just posted the other poem up under the chat. So feel free to type in an exclamation mark in the chat if you would like to comment. DLJ, go right ahead.
Yeah, so my first thought, given that the source poem had so many references to so much, I was kind of flooded, first of all, with just not mental images, because I'm aphantasiac, but word images, right? And I was thinking, there was the Robert Frost, there was the T.S. Eliot, there was the Hindu reference, there's loads, and it's like almost like, what do you leave out, right? But I think both poems, interestingly, picked on a kind of Jungian thing, which is one went for shadow, we went more for persona. Yeah, but that was it. It was just the wealth of, that was because it was a big poem, maybe. Yeah, but it gave us lots of choice, which was also nice. So yeah, I enjoyed that. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Type an exclamation mark. Feel free to comment on any of the things that we've experienced here together today. You know, I can wax poetic about that poem forever. I find that it's, you know, it's almost shocking to see it in black and white, this idea, because, you know, we all have it, you know, where we feel that we would love to be able to divide ourselves, or we feel that we are being divided in some of our thoughts, our feelings. So the poem is quite poignant in that it points that out for you. Oh, I have Shrikant. Go ahead, Shrikant.
Well, I also like the poem a lot. And it brings to my mind, I think it's very much Jungian. I remember Jordan Peterson talking about multiple personalities, you know, multiple characters. What he said is that it's much better to think of yourself as a complex of characters that are interacting with one another. So this is kind of an extension of that idea. So that's one part of it. It's like you're kind of, instead of saying, okay, I am this as a whole, this is saying, this is one aspect of me, this is one aspect of me, this is one aspect of me, and let's see how they are related to each other, how do they play with each other. So it's a very powerful way of understanding what is going on within you on one hand. Secondly, I also find externalization to be very powerful. You know, there are all these images of other people doing things as being part of your, you know, your personality, of your own self, your own integration. So it's kind of, it's a way of integrating the inner and the outer in a very odd way. So both those things, I think, are very powerful ways of kind of figuring out stuff about what is going on within you, both kind of inside you and outside you, and how they interact with one another. So I thought that was really, really powerful way of approaching kind of self-discovery.
Awesome. Thank you, Shrikant. I have Lily, you're next.
Hello. First of all, is the poem you copied to the chat, like, is it cut off at some point, or because that's what it looks like?
Yes, you're correct. I'll post the rest of it. Apologies.
Okay. How I interpret the poem that you read, which I really loved, and I guess how we created or took that theme and created something new is but I also find it really powerful how he takes the parts of himself that usually he wouldn't deems as unacceptable, instead of trying to change himself or trying to get rid of those parts, but just embodying it in this kind of separate self that is allowed to exist and it's allowed to be valid, and in that way it doesn't kind of bleed into his own behavior in toxic ways. Yeah, sorry if that sounds rambly.
No worries, that's great. I see that also, you know, and it's, I will say that from looking at the both of the collaborative poems that we came up with, it kind of shines a spotlight on this, when we talk of this song for soul, it invokes in us like almost an uncertainty, a question mark. And I think that that came through very clearly in both of the poems, albeit in vastly different ways, right? But it's that, you know, it's like to say someone, to ask them to speak of fragments of themselves, or the integration or disintegration of ourselves, our soul. It causes within us just a whole variety of questions. And that's what I'm seeing here. And with the collaborative poems, I'm always fascinated by what comes through from our subconscious that we ourselves are not day to day aware of. So, you know, we give you a centralizing or focusing theme, and then you're so busy writing lines that you don't realize what's happening as the lines are getting presented. There's a little bit from your subconscious that's bleeding through. So I find that to be very fascinating. Thank you, Lily. Next up, I have Paul.
Yeah, my comments are really after being in the group a little bit, you know, for a couple months or whatever it is here. I'm seeing the way we judge our success or failure at these nights differently tonight, which is, I think of it the way that I think of my own writing, meaning there's sort of three categories. And you can't expect you're in one of the categories every night. Like, one of the categories is the thing just comes out whole with no touching needed. And we've all experienced that who've tried to write. It's like when the miracle happens. And then there's a second kind of night or a day when me as a person writing, I try and I have a thought in mind, and then I essentially just throw it away eventually. I don't even think it's worth, you know, iterating on. And then there's a third category where I say, wow, there's a concept in here, and it's an important concept, and this is worth revising. And believe it or not, I feel that way about our poem tonight, like, because it captures the struggle between the selves in a very unique way, even though its incoherence is its flag in a way. So I'm just pointing out different ways to think about it. So we shouldn't really ever think we failed. We just think, well, this would be one we might not, we might have been enough incoherence there that it's not salvageable. That's okay. Or another night it's like perfect, or another night it's like, well, in the 17 minutes we had, we couldn't quite refine it, but yes, there's something there. So
I will say that this session today was interesting, because in our group, it was like when we switched from the making of lines to the restructuring for finessing it, it was like we read the poem and all of us like sat back and admired the lines, because we liked the lines individually and we knew that they needed changed because they didn't quite work the way they did, but we liked all the lines individually and we spent too much time admiring that. So I don't understand what happened, but like we blinked and it went from 10 minutes to 6 minutes to 2 minutes, and then it was time to go. We're like, but wait, it had all this stuff that we were gonna do to it. So, but no, it was yeah, it was a little different today. It was a little different feel, because it was like we kind of fell in love a little bit with the lines and forgot that we were supposed to be making them slightly more finessed, as it were. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah,
which
just
is,
quickly.
which is actually part of the theme. Sorry, that's got to just pick up on that. Because it's the parts versus the whole was the whole point of the original poem, wasn't it? So yeah. Nailed it. Well
exactly. Yeah, but I think the other little lesson for me is, it was triggered by your point about the subconscious, Maritza, is we got to watch out for a little too much thinking. Just like the poem says.
It's so true.
Let your mind just say something and don't worry if it doesn't seem quite right, because your subconscious has a plan that you don't even know. So that's a thought I want to take into my own,
Awesome.
learning too.
Thank you, Paul. Allison.
Yeah, I really agree with Paul because I feel like there are days when I feel like it really just flows beautifully. And then like today, I was not feeling it at all because like I was having all these Wi-Fi issues. I got a text that my flight might be canceled and I was like stressed. But what was funny was I felt like we had like all these disjointed ideas of like a stage and the woods and Robert Frost. But then somehow once we all just started picking away at it and editing it, suddenly like they came together and they made a whole lot of sense. So sometimes I think it really is true that sometimes like it's easy to do something when it's easy to do something, but sometimes when it's hard, there's still all these like great things in there. You just have to not give up on it. And then it kind of like, but yeah, sometimes you just focus on this one line and then you're like, wait a minute. And then you start coming up with other things. And so I guess what it shows, like, I know I've read things about writers who say that they schedule like a work day so that, every day from 8 to noon or whatever they write. And no matter whether they're feeling it or they're not feeling it, they just put something down. And then eventually they edit. And a lot of the writers that I've read that about, they say they need that structure. Like if they just sit around waiting for inspiration, they're never going to sit down and start typing anything. So it's kind of interesting to see it, that happen in play. Yeah.
And it's one of the amazing things of what we've been doing here. We are 5 months in here, and it's fun. So Lily, I've had the pleasure of seeing today. Lily, it was Lily's first time doing this, and it really is. I've gotten to see this many times now, where you see us doing something, you're like, what on earth? There's no way a poem is coming out of the end of this, and it does, and it really does every time. So I'm out, I actually was like, stick with us. It gets better. I promise. Good things are coming. So it is pretty impressive. And it's, and I like seeing, I like to see it unfold. And also when we come back together and everybody's like, it's like, it's a baby you created. What's this thing that I just created? And if for today specifically, we're talking about the fragments of self, of soul. I think it's fascinating, the idea of, like just it's funny how we talk about shadows within this, both of us, but in different ways. So in the one poem, they're talking about, lights, camera, action, and then you get the loud whisper, and you're searching for something, and then you find out, wait a minute, I think it's me. Is it me? And the same question is posed by the other poem that we have, but in an entirely different way, because the other poem says, I'm having a never-ending conversation with myself. And it alludes to this, that we all have this little trembling uncertainty that sits within us as to whether or not we're looking and interacting with the true self, as it were, or is it one of these shadow people? And so it's a I don't know, I really like seeing how it plays out for all of us here. Sorry, go ahead, Shrikant.
So I had 2 points. First, I wanted to follow up on what Paul said about the subconscious, because the subconscious is actually keeping track of patterns which you are not consciously aware of. And it puts something down, seeing those patterns. So even when it is being put down, you kind of have to let it do that. Because if you don't let it do that, then you're not going to ever see it. So kind of letting that, so respecting the subconscious for seeing patterns, I think is very deep principle. The second thing, see, I'm reading a lot of Jung right now. So these are the kinds of points that I automatically start thinking of. Like, for example, look at the play of the conscious and the subconscious that is being shown in this poem here. What happens is that moment you distinguish a particular character of, say, a gardener or a housekeeper as an aspect of you, and differentiate it, distinguish it, it actually frees your poet character. Because before that, it's like your concept of you included like poet and the person who keeps the house, all together, all mixed up as one kind of a gestalt. When the conscious mind creates this separate character, oh, this all housekeeping thing is being done by this, all the job related thing is being done by this, suddenly the air is being cleared for you to have a more distinct idea of the poet in you. So that allows you to identify it and then build on it like nothing else, because so that distinction is making distinction of one thing is making possible your distinction and expansion of other parts of you. I found that dynamic to be really fascinating about the poem.
Awesome. Thank you. Joe.
Actually, you can skip me. I was actually so into what Shrikant was saying. I kind of completely forgot like what I was saying really is
no.
kind of irrelevant to that. But I mean, that was deep. That was awesome.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? I have Allison, go ahead.
I think the idea of the stage, though, is kind of like going back and forth between stepping onto the stage and what you're thinking as you step onto the stage is a little bit like the shadow self, because the stage is like your persona that you're showing to the world. But then there's this interior monologue about what you're actually thinking and what you're actually feeling. And then you're kind of going back and forth of like, how much of yourself are you going to reveal or not reveal? And it's kind of like a dialogue we do all the time, you know? Like we do it all the time without even thinking about it. Because sometimes like with people we're really comfortable with, we show more of who we actually are. And then with people we don't know that well, you kind of just show a certain side. And then maybe like if you're at work, you show who you are to some people, but your closer friends will know more. But we're always kind of going back and forth between how much we reveal of ourselves, of our shadow self in a way. And a lot of it has to do with how well we know someone and how comfortable we feel. But that always takes time to come out, you know?
Right. The concepts that Shrikant was bringing up, I can see them reflected in both of the poems, albeit slightly different ways. And it's that to me, the part that like speaks most loudly is like the uncertainty. Like we're almost like hesitant to say that we're not sure, about that shadow self, as it were, right? It's interesting. Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, I feel like, as Shrikant, you guys know, I was reading The Master and His Emissary, which I kind of put aside, but it's still on my mind. But it makes me think of the neuroscience side of this, in that, like in counseling and things, we try to help people understand how each one of their personas actually contributes to them in some way, even if it seems like a shadow or something dark, as opposed to that poem, which is saying, get rid of everything but the poet. But that's sort of an impossibility, because the neuroscience says each of those things is a network that encompasses both left and right brain and all these. And so if you can't surgically extract one aspect of yourself and not be taking a piece of the aspects of the self you like. So you can't even do it psychologically, really. So somehow expressing that in a poem would be interesting.
So I didn't actually get that he was truly wishing to get rid of everyone. I viewed it as this and it, as somebody who writes in poetry, Paul, I'm sure at some point you felt where you need to sit down and write, but all of life's demanding things are getting in the way. That's kind of a little bit of what I felt there, like this idea that I am my truest self when I can grab that pen and write poetry, but there's laundry that needs done. So I got the feeling that that's what he was saying, is that, you know, my truest soul resides in the me that can sit and write poetry all day, you know, and the perfect scenery under the perfect tree. And yet, the rest of me requires all these million and four things. So it's you know, that's kind of the way I got that. And it's, you know, the interesting thing here is if you look at the poems that we created together, for both of them, I see kind of almost a similar longing. It's presented differently, but it's that longing to cut away from all the noise and find like that sharp, you know, thing, like, you know, the poem led in Allison's group, it's like the persona's purpose. Like, you know, am I looking for self-fulfillment? Am I going to be remembered? Should I care about that? It's like they're trying to peel away the layers of what might not be exactly what it is. And then, you know, in the one from the folks with my group, it's like, you know, it's that idea of, you know, I'm having this never-ending conversation. Is it actually getting me anywhere? Am I, you know, am I doing away with the things I need to be doing away, or should I be worried or afraid that I'm actually missing things? So, you know, it's a really, it's a powerful mental image. And I think that, you know, it was evoked within us with the featured poem, and we carried that through. And I think it shines through. You know, obviously it presents differently, but it shone through. So I do have one. Go ahead, Paul. I'm sorry. Do you have a follow-up?
I say yes and yes to your interpretation. And it's just the reminder that the beautiful poet under the tree actually needs the blabbermouth to be a beautiful poet. That's what I'm trying to say. That's all.
That's perfect. I love that. That's so true. And maybe that's the word of wisdom to take with us today, right? That, yeah, you would not be you if you truly could just sit under a tree and be a poet. No matter how much you think you might be, you require all those other fragments of the soul to actually have a soul. That's beautiful. I like it. So I would like to ask you guys, this is you know, a little bit of a more like little semantics thing. We had the smaller groups today. Allison, how did you feel about the group of the smaller circle, like 3 or 4 people? Was that more helpful for you? Was it like, because I know in the past we've had the idea of it being, you know, it was too big before and it didn't allow for enough time.
Yeah, it kind of works better in a smaller group, I think, because sometimes with the big group, you're each like, would you like to add something? Would you like to add something? And with a smaller group, everyone's just throwing everything in, and, you know, it kind of works a little better, I think. Yeah.
I agree. I like the smaller group as well. I think you get, everyone gets more of a voice. Unfortunately for them, it's easier for me to pick on them. But it is, I think that there's just more, and there's also more time for the reiteration when it's less of us, you know, less people moving lines, painting lines. I did find that today, and perhaps most likely it was probably because of the theme we were considering, we were wanting so badly to go off into tangents to kind of philosophize a little bit on the topic. So because of that, I would like to invite any of you to please go ahead and type in an exclamation mark if you want to maybe go off on that tangent that was evoked within you with the reading of any of these 3 poems, if we're thinking about these concepts. So, you know, we invite you to any of those things that you suppressed because you were trying to write the poem, actually. Nobody has unshared angst. I have thoughts. Shrikant does. Go ahead, Shrikant.
Okay, I've been wanting to make this observation. You know, again, I'm reading a lot of Jung, so this is all Jung in my head right now. If you look at this process of collaborative writing, I want to compare this poem and the theme of this poem to what we do in collaboration. What he's saying is that, see, if you look at it, these are all individuals collaborating. Each brings their own subconscious or unconscious and their conscious to the table. So in a sense, you're putting a character down, one of those characters that he talks about, down when you put down a line. That is your person that you're putting on the table. Okay, I'm just looking at it metaphorically now, the poem. And several other people put down their own lines, own characters who kind of bounce off each other a little bit. Sometimes they're completely separate. Once you're done, you're looking at a cast of characters here, and you're trying to make them play together. Some of them kind of combine and merge together. Some of them constitute like a change of gear in the poem. They have to be moved around a little bit to make a play. But I see this as analogous to the poem, the process of doing a collaborative poetry that we do, analogous to what he's talking about in the poem.
I could see that, definitely. Gives me food for thought. It's interesting. I'm now sorry, guys. I'm thinking, I'm revisiting the poem in my mind and thinking of it from a perspective of collaboration. Because it's funny, he doesn't seem to address it at all in the actual poem, but I guess probably if we're agreeing that, you know, he's wishing for the poetic self to be the only self, there's the acknowledgement that they can't be. So I you know, it's somewhere in there behind the scenes, there has to be the desire for the collaboration, because it's what Paul was just saying, that you cannot possibly be that poet sitting under the tree without being the poet who has to, you know, do the laundry. So that's a fascinating connection there to make. Okay, folks, so this was lovely. And I really would urge you guys, if you get a chance, do look up, you know, this poet. I think he's amazing. He's Nepali, and Suman Pokhrel. I'm fascinated by his works. I mean, I cheat a little bit because I say that about a lot of the poets. Go ahead, DLJ.
So my takeaway, the moral to the story for this week: if you want to be a good poet, get somebody else to do your laundry. That's what I've learned.
Oh man, that's terrible. Hopefully he's speaking in jest. So Shrikant is asking, what is the topic for collaboration next time? So for next week, we're going to be, the centralizing focus is going to be duality. So we're jumping a little bit off of this one. So duality will be what we're going to ask you to think about. So you have a whole week to chew on it and to come together again in a week, and we'll see. I don't yet have the featured poem chosen, but we will post it up within a day or two. You'll see the featured poem up on the meetup page, and then when we meet, we'll do the same format. We'll be writing more poetry, and we're entering into the 6th month together next week. Very exciting. If any of you has a deep burning desire for a specific poem to be the featured poem, I do take suggestions. Feel free to send me something if you wanted to. I make no promises, but I do take suggestions. Shrikant, go ahead.
I just want to tell people about the exciting meetups coming up on Thursday. So firstly, on Wednesday, CJ is going to be back. It's amazing. I've really missed him. And he's going to be talking about measuring your life. How do you measure your life? That's what the topic is. So this is Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern time. On Thursday, we continue our series on Carl Jung, the 7 Sermons to the Dead. This time we're talking about the deepest concept in that entire book, called abraxas, which is very different from most concepts, religious concepts that we've talked about, most spiritual concepts. So it is a very powerful concept. It's my favorite part of that entire book. So that's what it is going to be. So don't miss that. We're going to have a few Jungian analysts there, Jungian scholars, talking about their take on it. On Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, Yasuhiko Kimura continues his series on new spirituality for the future. And he's going to be talking about postmodern times and what does spirituality look like in the postmodern times. So he's trying to answer the question. I'm reading a book by Jung about modern man in search of his soul. So Yasuhiko is trying to answer the question, where is that soul and what does it look like in modern times and what can it look like? That's what he's going to answer. So it's going to be a very deep conversation. That's what is coming up. If you missed the presentation by Evanique and Brian on the divine feminine, it is up on the YouTube. So I put a link to one of the playlists, the playlist for this particular series, but you can go there and go to 52 Living Ideas on YouTube, and you can see the presentation on divine feminine. It was truly, truly new. I think the modern Western culture is very much male dominated, and it is kind of masculine, not just male dominated, but more importantly, it is masculine. And it has not emphasized the feminine aspects as much, like, for example, Chinese thinking of yin yang does. So that's what that series is about. And so please check that out on YouTube. So these are some of the things. All right, closing thoughts, Maritza, over to you.
So I actually I wasn't aware that there were these meetups coming up that are actually going to be almost like a continuing theme of what we've started the week off with, which is kind of awesome. Yes, so looking at duality, it's kind of the idea of the integration and disintegration, as it were, because that's how we experience growth. So I'm looking forward to going into more detail in that with you, especially if you guys attend any of the discussions that she can't just identified for us, because I think it'll give us new information to discuss and dissect. So thank you guys for sharing your Monday with me. I look forward to seeing all of you in a week. Thank you and have a great rest of your evening. Thanks all.
Everyone.
Bye. Good night.